Today we're going to take HTV Ront vinyl, add it to this Kmart canister to create this upscale vase. So let's make this. So for our materials today, I've got a standard grip mat. I'm trying out the HTV Ront grip mat for the first time in this video. I've got the Kmart canister, which comes with a great rubber lid, but I'm going to use it for a vase. And then I'm using some HTV Ront permanent vinyl. I've got some black as well as a few metallics. And finally some ice coal, which I think I got from Coles for a couple of dollars. So we're starting in Canva. Today, we're actually not going to start in a square design. We're going to create a custom size. So we're going to go down, after we click on Create Design, we're going to go down to Custom. And we're actually going to create a size that is the same as the vase. Now, it's not going to translate over to Design Space perfectly, but it will give us at least the right shape. So we're going to change the units and we're going to change them to centimetres. And we're going to go 31 by 17 because that's the size of the vase. I've done a little measurement using my tape measure. And I'm going to start with flowers. Now we're looking for graphics here and we're looking for free, but still it doesn't give us our free option. I don't know how. Sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. You've just got to go with it. I hate it. I don't know. I'm trying to work it out. If anyone out there knows, please let me know. So I've done a little search for straw flowers, and you can see that all the straw flowers there are all pro versions. So now I'm going for my second option. Now this flower motif, even though it's in different colours, it's actually a really good one because you can see up the top next to flip that there are all the different colours that are on that image. So what you can actually do is change those colours. Now I'm just duplicating this image because I want it to go across the bottom of the whole thing. So I've just duplicated it and I'm going to just place it so that we've got it looking as natural, I suppose, as possible. So I'm going to change all of these to the same colour. Just, I don't know, so we can have a good understanding of what it's going to look like at the end. So here I've got my yellow. To begin with, I was going to do the background yellow, so in the gold colour. So that's why I've started and made all of these a yellow colour. Now I'm looking for something tall with a long stem. So now's a good time for you to scroll and see what you can find. But I found this. It's as close to a cosmos as I can find. I love a cosmos flower. So I want to create a little motif of something that kind of looks like a wildflower garden. So these should all be different sizes, different heights. Try not to make it in a real step motion, so it's going tall down to short. You want a bit of randomness to it. So I've got one that I want that's going to be really tall to stand out. And you can see there I'm just right-clicking on the image and hitting duplicate. That will save you a bit of time than going back and clicking each time. So I've got some, as you can see, I've got some that are one that's really tall and then I've got a shorter one. I'm having a little play around here to see if I can find anything else. These flowers here have got really thin lines. So I would avoid those, particularly because we're using the metallic vinyl, and the metallic vinyl sometimes has a bit of an issue with those thinner lines. Even the ones on the cosmos flower I'm a bit wary of, but hopefully it will work out the way we want it to. Now's a great time for you to pause and have a play around and see what you can find. So in the end, I've decided to just stick with the two flowers. There were a couple there that I could have used, but I decided that I didn't want to overcrowd it. But the top of our design is showing a little bit of white space that probably could have something to fill it. So now I'm looking for a bee. So I thought maybe I'll do a little bit of a bee and a butterfly flying around. And I'm looking for one that's not too cartoonish, but also the ones that are hyper real have got too many thin lines in them. So I'm looking for one that, I mean, I really love this guy. He's really cute. And if I put him in there, I think it'll work. Yeah, but then when I make it smaller, I just think that those lines maybe, I don't know, we'll have a little, I might scroll through and have a little bit more of a look and see if I can find some that are a little bit less realistic. If they were bigger, I think these bees would be fantastic as a vinyl. The weeding would show some real size to it and show some realism. But I think as they are, I mean, look at how pretty it is. Just really worried about it though. So now I'm going to have a look at the butterflies. I'll keep those bees for the moment, but we'll see how we go. So I've gone to the filter and I've clicked static because the butterflies, there's lots of them that are moving around. And I'm looking for one, again, with some kind of, see that realism is great, but has it got too many lines? I really worry about this because it's the metallic vinyl. And because it's going to be small. See, that one's better because it's got some less of those lines, but I think it actually looks a bit too much like the flower. And since I've got that yellow flower undertone, which is block, and then I've got the flower, which is the drawing, I think maybe that butterfly is going to be too much like the flower and it's not going to give enough contrast. See, that's a bit too much of a drawing too. Cool, very cool, but too much of a drawing. So I'm going to have a bit of a look and see if I can find one that's a little bit less line dense, and we'll see how we go. Great time for you to pause and do the same thing. Just have a scroll, have a look. See, this one's better. It's a bit fuller. It's got the right shape. It shows the shape that I want without having all of the extra lines, and I think it just shows the person that's looking at it what it is without it being over the top. Now that I've selected that butterfly, I think the bee looks out of place. So I'm going to see if I can find one. I don't want it to be a cartoon like with our shoes, but I want one that's not as extreme on the realism. So I think this one here might be a good idea because I've got, see how it's those block shapes and those thicker lines. So it's kind of realistic, but not. Let's have a look what it looks like. So I'm just changing these colours just so I can have a look at it really. And this one on the right hand side here, that might be the perfect one actually. See, it kind of, even though it's got the straight lines, whereas the butterfly is the curved lines, but that's kind of what a bee is. The bees are more straightforward than a butterfly. They're block shapes. So I'm just going to change the colours of each of these. Not that it's going to make any difference when we take it into Design Space, just so that I can have a look at it and I can see whether or not I like the layering that I've got and have a little bit of distinction. So I'm not going to duplicate these bees and butterflies because I'll do that in Design Space. But now what I'm going to do is move each of those images to a different page so that we've got our there's going to be 4 different layers that we can upload into Design Space. And now that I've done that, we're just going to share and we're going to save it as a PNG. If you do have Canva Pro, you could save this as an SVG and not have to change it into those 4 different layers and have a different page for each part. Or you could still do the 4 different pages but save them as transparent PNGs, and then that way when we go into Design Space you won't have to make those changes and get rid of all of the background on each image. Now I've made sure that we have extracted that file because as PNGs it's going to come as a folder and we can't upload folders into Design Space. So make sure that you either for Mac you double click on it, it will extract it for you. If you're a PC user you right click on the folder and choose extract all and then it will do that for you. Alright, so now I'm going to upload each of our images. So I'm going to start with our background. Now, this one's going to be straightforward to remove the background. So it's just going to be one click. But just check each time, check your preview single layer, because you think it's going to be easy. But on the right-hand side there, it was a big blob. So you can see that there. So you're just going to get rid of that little yellow bit. And then I want to get rid of that white bit as well. So I'm going to just leave that little bit there that I've played around with. I think it's just going to really either not cut, or it's going to be able to be easily ripped off. So I'm just going to save it as background flowers in case I want to go back and use it again. And then I'm going to repeat that process with my other 3 layers. So now that we've got all of our 4 layers, we're going to then create a mock version of what our vase would look like. So I'm just getting a square, and I'm going to change the color to green, because that is going to be the color of our vase. And make sure that I click on the lock above size, and I'm going to put 31 by 17, because I know that that is the measurements of the vase. I'm going to move the square to the background. So I've done that on the right hand side. I've just clicked and dragged it. And then I am going to just manipulate each of my layers here. Now, as I'm doing that, I'm going to make sure that it fits within that green square, and I'm going to change the colors. So I've decided I'm going to keep that background color as black. And I'm going to either go with the gold or the silver for these taller cosmos style flowers. And so I'm just going to move that around. So I'm just going to make sure it fits on the square perfectly. That way when I cut it, it won't be too tall for our vase. And I'm going to make my butterflies a rose gold colour. I've decided to change my cosmos to silver because I've realised my bee is going to have to be yellow, or the gold colour. And I'm going to duplicate these butterflies. Now, this is where you can think about your design and what you're going to have as your overall design. You can flip. So up the top, we've got options to say flip, and that will flip your design horizontal or vertical. Now I've done a horizontal one because I want the butterfly to face the other way. If you rotate, you're not going to end up with the butterfly facing a different direction. And the reason I've done that is just to ensure that it looks a little bit more, I don't want to say realistic, because I'm not sure that these butterflies are realistic, but butterflies don't all fly in the same direction. They're not all drones. They all go in different fluttery directions. So that's why I've just decided to point some in some direction and some in the other. And now with our bees, I'm probably going to do a few more of the bees than I have butterflies. Also, because I think I could make these bees a little bit smaller, because they're quite solid little units, I'll be able to weed them a little bit easier than our butterflies. And so I'm going to repeat that process of duplicating each of my butterflies as we go, and flipping just like I did with the butterflies. And I'm also going to rotate some of these. With the bees, they're not all going to point in the same direction. So you might want to rotate, you might want to flip, you could do some chasing each other. It's up to you how you want to do this design. And then remember, when you get to actually putting it on the vase, you might change your mind, because once you see it in real life, it will be different than what we've got here. So have a play around, and then we'll move on to our next step, which is making. So make sure you save your design. Again, you've put a fair bit of effort into putting it together, so you don't want it to then disappear, or you have to do an update and Design Space deletes what you've done. And then we're going to go to make. We're going to click on mat. And you can see here that I've got some long mats. Very confusing for me. But I think it's got to do with, so this one here, so I can change my mat size for this one. When I go down to the next one though, my flowers seem to be a little bit too big. So I'm going to try and rotate and see they keep flipping back, which means that they don't fit on the mat properly. So I'm going to have to go back into Design Space. I'm going to have to cancel this. See, I keep playing with it, but it's not working. So I'm going to cancel, and I'm just going to go back into, click on those black flowers, and you can see there that we've got a 30.47. Now that doesn't give the machine enough space. So rule of thumb, if it's more than about 29 centimeters, it's going to ask you for a longer mat. If you've got the longer mat, not a problem at all. I don't. That's why I've had to change mine. If you've got the longer 61 centimeter mat, then go for it. Absolutely go for it. That's probably on my list of things to buy eventually. But at this point, I haven't done anything that's required it, so I've never bought the longer mat. The other thing is, I'm just going to get rid of that green square because I don't need it. We're not printing that. All right, so now we can see everything looks like I've got this 30 centimeter mat. So I'm going to move all of my metallics onto the same mat. So I've held my shift key down and selected each of those butterflies on the pink mat, and I've clicked on the left hand side the dots, and I've chosen move object. So I'm going to move them over to the grey mat, and then I'm going to do the same with the bees. Shift key, click, click, click. The dots, click on move object, and then I'm going to move them to the silver. I'm not going to move the black one though, because it is not a metallic vinyl that we are using. It's a regular vinyl. So I'm going to choose just the vinyl setting for that one. Whereas the bees, the butterflies, and these cosmos looking flowers, I'm going to use metallic vinyl, which will have a different pressure setting. So that's why I've moved those. If you wanted to do formats, go ahead, do formats. It's just, I choose to do that just to save time. So now let's cut and move on to production. So I'm just going to weed all of our materials. Now, this silver one is a really big piece. So what I'm going to do is, as I go through, I'm going to firstly start off with taking out all of the internal pieces, which is really important to, I think, to start with, mainly because it gives you a bit of an outline of where you're going when you pulled off the outside vinyl. And then what I'm going to do is the outside. Now, as I go through the outside, you'll see that I pull a little bit up, and then I am going to cut. So the reason I do that is to make sure that as I go, I'm not pulling up the rest of my decal. Especially with this metallic vinyl, I've found that it's a little bit finicky. It's a little bit more cumbersome to pull it up. So as you're going, if you cut on these larger pieces as you go, you're not going to pull up the rest of your decal. So now we're going to start adding our vinyl to our canister. Now I'm going to start with the black flowers first because they're my undergrowth. Now this is going to help me to make sure that the rest of it remains straight. I've wiped over the canister with some isocol, just with some paper towel, to make sure that any greasy fingerprints or anything have disappeared. And now I'm just going to use the wet method, but I'm only going to use the wet method very lightly because I made a mistake when I first did this, and the wet method really messed with the metallic vinyl on this. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the green coating on the outside of the canister, but it really messed with the metallic and I had to restart this. So this is my second go. But the black worked a little bit better. So I'm going to make sure that I use the wet method for the black, and mainly because I'm trying to get this straight. And so if I want to move this around a little bit as I go, the wet method allows me to make some changes. So you can see here that I've managed to get it fairly straight and nearly bubble free. But because this black matte vinyl from HTV Ront is a little bit more forgiving, it actually goes around a little bit nicer. All right, so now that we've got the black vinyl down, I'm going to now put the silver. Now, I don't know whether or not, I don't know why this one hasn't bubbled, but look, to all the Cricut gods out there, I'm very happy with it. The one mistake I have made, and I will relay this to you as well, is you can see I've got one really tall flower. And what I failed to consider is how I was going to make sure that one tall flower made sure it sat on the vase really well. I've actually, right at the top, hits the very top of the vase. Now, that's fine, but that's not really how I wanted it to be. I just wanted to offset a little bit from that lip. And so I've had to kind of do a little bit of mushing. So what I would have done if I was to do this again, I would have started with the top, with that tall flower first, to make sure that it was in place before I moved any of my put the vinyl down for any of the other stuff. But, you know, like I've said before, you live and learn, and once the flowers are in, you're not going to be able to really tell that I've mucked that one up a little bit. But that's my tip to you. Make sure that whatever is the tallest component of your design, make sure that you put that one down first, because that will help to make sure that everything else fits in perfectly. So you can see there that at the top of that tall flower, I've had to kind of mush it, do a little bit of cutting to make it fit in. But I've managed to still keep the integrity of the petal that I've made a mistake with. So if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. You just got to adapt. And look, even though it's permanent vinyl, that vinyl will come off. So if you're really unhappy with it, you can just take your weeding tool and just lift. If it won't lift straight away, you can use a hairdryer, and that will help because it loosens the glue. And so it melts the glue. So what it enables you to do is lift that a lot more easily. But like I said, I'm okay with it. I'll deal. And if I didn't like it, I would redo it. So now that I've done my black undergrowth and now I've got my silver flowers over the top, now it's time for my bees and my butterflies. So I've cut those into individual components so that I can place them. I'm not really worried about where I put them on my Design Space canvas. I just want to make sure that I have that they're going to look good on that physical vase. The butterfly that I chose had some cutting issues in terms of its little antenna. The only one that worked was the large one, but I kept one of the smaller ones because without the antenna it looks fine. It still has the body. The really small one, the body lifted as well. So keep that in mind when you're looking for your shapes and think about those really fine lines. I didn't, so that's why I've ended up in a bit of a pickle. But as I said, it still has that imagery and that shape of a butterfly. And in real life, do we really always see the antenna of the butterfly? Not really. And because that butterfly is smaller, you can think of it as being in the background rather than in the foreground. I can spin this in a multitude of different ways. But basically it comes down to I made a mistake and I should have really thought about how those antenna would look when I weeded, or how they would work with the weeding. So now I'm just going to put the second butterfly on, and then I'm going to follow that same process to put the bees on. Again, I'm not really concerned as to where in particular those bees are compared to the image that I put onto Design Space. But if you are and you really had your placement perfect, then keep Design Space up in the background and use that as your guide. So you can see also that I had a bit of a bee issue. One of the bees, I just think it's the metallic vinyl that's a bit thicker. So you got to be really careful and do it a little bit slower. But most of my little bees worked, and my big bees obviously were perfect, because they're just that little bit bigger and easier to weed. So now I'm just going to place those bees around and let's see how we go. I'm really impressed that the butterflies and the bees actually haven't had any bubbling at all. I'm not sure if it's got something to do with that green coating. That's the only thing I can think of, because we haven't used the wet method. I mean, it's not acrylic. Maybe it's got to do with the fact that it's a glass canister. I'm not sure. If anyone's got any thoughts as to why I didn't need to use the wet method and I had no issues with bubbling, then let us know in the comments below, because that'd be fantastic, because it would help a lot of people out trying to work out when is the best time to use the wet application method versus the dry application method. So I've just gone over the metallic components with just a little bit of isocol on some paper towel, just because a few of them had a little bit of residue left over from the transfer tape. And because it's nighttime, it's a little bit dark, and that green vase, I've just put a little bit of white transfer tape paper inside, just so we can see the inside, and I think it looks fantastic. I'm so happy with the design, and I'm really looking forward to putting some flowers in there to see how it really does look in the daylight. So here it is. How amazing does it look? So I've got some flowers out of my garden, and you wouldn't believe that today's been an overcast day all day, and the sun comes out just as I'm about to film. So we've used permanent vinyl here, metallic as well as matte vinyl, for our upscale of our $3 Kmart canister. So I hope you enjoy making this, and please comment below with some of your pictures.